Hello and welcome back to another episode of Let's Talk Universal, a podcast sponsored by the UWI, which is an organisation helping companies to harness the power of their workforce. Today, I am joined by Sandra Ballij, founder and owner of Ctalents and international speaker on inclusion. Welcome, Sandra. I'm so pleased to have you join us today.
Well, thank you for having me, Erica. Love to have a little chat about our favorite subject.
Absolutely. So let's get right on into it. Can you tell our audience a little bit about you and what led you to where you are today as the founder of Ctalents?
Yeah, well, Ctalents it's not my first social enterprise I founded. I started back in 2007. I made the big switch from being a banker to being a social entrepreneur. And in 2007, I started a dining in the dark restaurant. Which was quite new at that moment. At this point, I think there are about 30 of them in the world, so that makes a good progression. In a dining in the dark restaurant, only the true experts of the dark work there, mostly known by other people, by people who are blind or have a bad sight. Yeah, that's where my adventure started, and then I got a little bit hooked to the subject. I met so many talented people who made me aware of things where I had a blind spot on. And I met so many people who had university degrees and were just working in my restaurant. And there's nothing wrong with working in a restaurant, but if you pass your bar or your, PhD in marketing, there are different opportunities for you as well, according to my perspective. And that's actually how Ctalents was born. Is also to make sure, it's our mission, that everyone can be seen, heard, and valued for his or her talents. And Ctalents is a secondment agency who is only there for people who are blind or deaf or have hard of hearing or have a visual impairment. In between, we founded also the Sign Language Coffee Bar, which is a coffee catering company where you can only order in sign language. So who's the handicapped person now? Where we trained people who are happy to be deaf to become the best baristas of the world. The customers can teach themselves how to order with a little video in 10 seconds. You can sign, for example, your tea, your cappuccino. It's quite fun. And that was also a fast-growing company, and now a big catering company. It's continuing that dream. So
some really exciting stuff. You've been very, very busy, Sandra.
I've been so busy, but it's also so much fun. So
yeah, and what is it that is fulfilling to you about all of these things that you've been doing? What do you find fulfills you as a person with this work?
I have a quick answer and a longer version. What do you want? I try to do them both. I think the quick question is, I'm just going to quote one of our talents who said, like, Sandra, because of this, I went from surviving to living again. So people get back on their feet, not only having a job, but having a life again. Because being seen is doing so much more than just giving you your money, of course. So people, buy houses, start families, do a lot of things they thought they were not capable of doing before they started their career or their opportunities. And what I mostly see in social entrepreneurs, they almost all have a personal story as well, and so am I. So that's, you must be a little bit crazy to do, to start a business where the market is not developed on supply and demand, side. You must be a little bit crazy to start that. So that's mostly a personal purpose. And I think mine is when I was around 80 years old, from one day to another, I collapsed and I could not walk anymore. So I got in a wheelchair. And that was very scary. And I think the most scary part of that was that people were not talking to me anymore, but to the person behind me. I needed to stop for some time my university college. And it has a huge impact in your life that just like one day this can happen. And I think I was a lucky one, because it's a rare disease, and it can be I say it in silent mode. So it's in silent mode now. And I was very lucky, because after a few weeks, it already got in silent mode. So I got my chance to, get my life back. But I take the lesson of not being seen and heard or valued for my possibilities, because nobody was asking anymore about my future. There were only questions about taking care of you, and it felt so bad. And I made a deal with myself that I never want to feel that again. So yeah, I do not have any influence on having a disease or not, but I do have influence how to cope with it, but also how to influence the world to see different to people, to really be seeing what their added value is. Yeah.
Sure. Thank you for sharing that, Sandra. I think there is a relatable story, I think, for a lot of people, in the sense that, something can change instantly overnight and prevent you from doing X, Y, or Z, and then it affects the way that you relate to the world around you and the world relates to you. So
exactly.
Yeah,
and it could happen to everyone, and that's well, I think that's a good insight. And also, I think when I was determined, I never want to be in that situation again. I also felt like no one should be in that situation again. So I think that's the foundation of all my social enterprises.
sure. Yeah. So let's talk about Ctalents then. So
Yeah.
if you could kind of bring it down to one thing that it does, what does it help? What problem is it helping organizations to solve? What is it that it's doing for them?
Well, we are a recruitment, a secondment agency for a very specialized talent. So what do we solve? Well, there is a huge demand for labor, for people who can add value and maybe make sure that your company, improves themselves on a different level. So we have only talents who either have a huge focus, an eye for detail, because they are deaf, and that can translate in so many type of jobs, being an accountant or a financial expert or data scientist. Or we have talents with a talent hearing what's not being said but being meant in the conversation or the deal. So we see people who work from that side as a specialist in HR, in mediation, but also making policies or marketing strategies. So in also the translation of strategies. That was not one sentence, huh? One sentence is the untapped pool of talents.
Yeah, no. And what markets is that? Is that specific industries? Is that particular levels of an organization, or is that multiple levels?
It's multiple levels. Where our main partners are like the banking industry, the professional financial services industry, and we also work, for example, the Dutch police and a large university. So this type of organizations is where we currently work on. But I'm sure we can do this in every sector, but we need some speed to get there. Our mission also as a part is like on 2030. I want to make sure that at least 5,000 people have a big step in their career through us, and at least one of them is being a CEO. So that, to point out, that's the level we're talking about. We're not there yet, but we make sure that everyone can make a little step, a little step, a little step. And there are people who are highly ambitious in our group of people, and people who are just fine with their job, just in a regular group of people. So by 2030, I can definitely say all levels, including the CEO. We're not there yet, but we are already in quite high levels. Yeah,
that's an admirable goal, and I hope you reach it. When organizations first approach Ctalents or yourself, what stage are they at with this? What are they looking to achieve?
Yeah, well, I mostly see this roadmap. There are like 5 stages of it. And in the beginning of our activities, they were all in step 1, which is, I'm not aware of this at all. And about 88% of organizations are still there. So I'm talking about disability inclusion, which is very niche. And a lot of people, when I get connected, who are even responsible for the department inclusion, then their disability inclusion is not really part of that yet. We're just they're on the level female, male, LGBTIQ plus, cultural diversity, but not disability inclusion yet. I think that's mostly because it's unknown. If people do reach out now, it's because they're on the second step, and that's because of legislation. So there is legislation in Holland which promotes to hire people with a disability as well. And I always think it's quite, inspiring to start from that point, because then there's someone accountable for the subject. And then the only thing we need to do is to, enlarge their world, that there's so much more possible than just doing it out of legislation part, or organizations come because they have a lack of talent. They've a lot of work, and on a certain point they say like, okay, what the hell, then just I brought it up, let's give it a try. And that's a possibility. Another possibility is that people really do have a strategy on it, a vision. That's mostly because then there's a CEO or someone very on high level who is also embraced the subjects themselves. And then then we mostly meet them on lots of level. And I think the next steps, there are not so many organizations in those steps yet, so that they already have the capabilities in it. And the next step is they really trust it and they are all organized around it. And the last part is that you really create a competitive edge, because you truly reach inclusion in the full perspective.
Yeah, and with that kind of is that a challenge if they're in that first phase of kind of getting them to move from that first phase into the second?
You need to prove. Yeah, you definitely need to prove, because a lot of people think I'm just bullshitting them till they experience it. And that's, it's not so weird, because especially in the Netherlands, still not so long ago, people who are blind or deaf got automatically 100% disabled and got, social security, and were put away in schools and areas where they could live. So not a very inclusive approach of people who are a little bit different. So a lot of people do not have any experience with, or do not know anyone who happens to be blind or deaf. It doesn't mean they don't exist.
Yeah. And are there any other kind of holdbacks in that process, do you find, within an organization that prevents them, when, from your experience of working with them, that prevents them from, I don't know, adopting this talent?
Yeah. Definitely. There are quite some. That's the reason why we need it. I hope in 10 years' time we're not needed anymore and it flows. I think the first one is the unconscious bias, that they really think that people who are blind or deaf have less IQ and less capabilities, which is complete bullshit. Like the sign, like this is bullshit. I'm just putting it out here because people can really remember this is bullshit. It really is, but it's so they have normal IQ, normal. So there are people who are very high IQ, but also people who are very low, but most of them in the normal range, just like another type of group of people you have. And the second unconscious bias is that they think that they cannot work on regular pace. I already hired more than 500 of them. Mostly when we meet them, that's true, because they need to be trained in it as well, to use with the tooling they exist nowadays to work very good with that. So it's not true that they cannot work on regular pace, but it is true that a lot of them still need a training to get that. And the third one is really about accessibility, because a lot of the toolings only work when you have approval of the IT department. You need some software. I think there's a lot of regulation about that you already should have it or are obliged to have it, but the translation of that is still, somewhere in between. So I think we are also here to inspire organizations to really make a strategy on it and translate that, because if you still want to be there in 10 years time, you need this untapped pool of talent. So you need to be accessible. That's not a nice to have, it's a need to have.
Absolutely. And it's the same story with, you know, other groups as well, you know,
Sure.
neurodivergent talent and women, you know, they're all untapped pools of talent, aren't they, that companies are just not accessing right now for, you know, a number of reasons, as you've just mentioned. But what I think that our listeners would be interested to know is what kind of, with Ctalents and the services that it provides organizations, what kind of outcomes, perhaps benefits, they can look to see as a result of working with Ctalent and adopting this talent into their workforce.
Yeah, so we have a program which exists out of 4 elements. One is the accessibility, one is about accountability, the first one is about empowerment, and the fourth one is about sustainable impact on the workforce. So if you get this translated in your organization well, it leads that you can be a true inclusive organization, which leads to, I think, a positive workforce flow. So you'll be attractive also for the new generation. I think the new generation, really happy with them. I think they can really make the change, because the old boys network, people don't want to work there anymore because they cannot truly be themselves. And if you cannot be truly yourself, you also cannot really add the value as you can to an organization. And what we do see, you know, in real life, where our talents work, what we do see is that if one of our talents start working in the department, that the overall sick leave also diminishes. It's really fun to see that. We try to ask what happens. It's also about perspective, and people get inspired that so much more is possible than they thought. And I think that overall, if work happiness is high, you know, sick leave is lower. So if all people can do what they're truly good at, if you are able to organize that in your organization, that's your added value. And our job carving method is, you know, is supporting that.
Is there, I know that we've spoken about, you know, this awareness piece and this, you know, bringing that awareness into the organization first, but to really see this kind of program, for lack of a better word, succeed in an organization, is there something that it absolutely needs, such as, you know, someone who is in the workplace and leading this and driving?
Definitely accountability, you know, is one of our program elements. Accountability is key. If there's not a strategy, a vision with targets, then it's just a coochie project, will die within a year. No offense, but it's with all changes and innovations you want to make in your company or organization. There's always a plan, a strategy. Why are you doing this? Who is accountable for it? What's the budget with it? And what are the targets we need to get in the first year? But also, please do have a long-term strategy. Otherwise, it's not a strategy. Then it's a project. So what we notice is that you always need, actually from board level, you need a person who's accountable for it. And then next to that, you have your HR department, but also a lot of layers of managers, hiring managers. There are always a lot of people who are very positive to the subject. You only need to find them and then make sure they have the budget and the accountability for it. And then it can really grow quite quickly.
Yeah, and we've obviously kind of covered the organization, but what about the talent itself? Because when we've previously spoken, we've also kind of talked about that mindset change that also needs to happen with the talent itself, because for so long they've been perhaps told that they're not good enough for a role, or so what are your
yeah. So it's and it's not all of them, of course, because I do not like to talk about a whole group as one feature. But you can imagine, if you hear every day you're not capable of doing something, that maybe one day you start believing that. And I think if you got raised on special schools with a lot of care around you, that you have not a clear vision of your own potential as well, because nobody spoke with you about it. And if you try to start that conversation, people say it's not for you. So we meet a lot of people who are still not aware about all their capabilities. So yes, we have conversations ourselves, but we also connect because now we have a huge community of people already, getting the bridge into their careers. And we always asking them, can you be the example of someone else? So I really believe in the power by the group themselves, because they're so talented and motivated to really get there, but there need to be a start. And also the people around them, like their mother, their teacher, whoever you can think of, they're mostly also not aware of the possibilities. I got phone calls like, what the hell are you thinking? You cannot tell my son this. It's not possible. So it is possible. So, it's quite deep in society. So also with the talents themselves. So what do? We do assessments to make sure what their IQ is, but also their competences. We make sure they get the training. For example, when you're blind, from visual, non-visual working. It's a skill you can learn, like every skill in the world. But so yeah, there's always some work needs to be done, and next to that, they also need to be empowered for when what's your added value to an organization, that you're not going to talk about your medical history. Nobody really cares about that. People care about what are you going to add. So I think there's our program also focus. That's why we are the social enterprise. Yeah.
Sure. And I think it would be interesting as well to get your perspective on sort of diversity, equity, and inclusion just across the board. We've obviously in recent months seen a bit of a dip in the interest or the drive, whatever you want to call it, behind those diversity programs in and inclusion programs in organizations. Can I ask, from your perspective, what's happening with inclusion in the European market?
I do not recognize actually what you saying, that the programs are less. So in the Netherlands, so I don't see that going down. Actually, what I do see that there's more movement now, because there's on European level, there's the corporate social responsibility directives. They're only focused on the large organizations, of course, the corporates, but because they need to report on their impact, they also going to give these directives to their supplier, which are the smaller companies as well. So, and that's already from 2025. So actually, I start things moving now, because there's even on board level now someone responsible for getting the corporate social responsibility directives. It's a report you need to have next to your annual normal numbers, which is the most important day of a lot of organizations. So yeah, now they need to communicate about their impact. So what I see is that people now thinking about, okay, now we really need to do something if they were not doing anything. So, and if they were already doing things, they now get the support to, make their program a little bit bigger.
Yeah, I think that's interesting in the sense that, it's the emphasis is placed on the corporate social responsibility and diversity and inclusion as a piece of that. Whereas I think we see in markets like the US, where it's very isolated from that, and it tends to be a discussion all on its own. So perhaps that's where the difference is. And with the changes that you're seeing in the market for inclusion, do you think there is something that perhaps is holding organizations back from making that commitment to inclusion?
Well, yeah, it's not one reason. I think it depends on the organization, but mostly on the people working there. If you truly don't believe it can be working, and that you only see it as doing good, then it's not going to be a part of your real, strategy. So I think the number one is still that people don't know the good examples already, and what they also need to do to make sure that's successful. I always compare it. It's like you're a square company, and now you're trying to attract circles and triangles, and it can be fitted in, but not through your normal channel. So your normal channel of a square needs to adjust a little as well. You have the toys for the babies, and I should have brought it here and put it. You can really see like people trying to get the square, the triangle in the square. It's not gonna fit like that. So you need to do your homework as well to make sure it fits. But it does not look like a square. That's correct. I think that's the beautiful saying. If you judge a fish by its capability to climb a tree, it will spend its whole life thinking it's stupid. That's exactly the case.
Yeah.
If you do assessment with, for example, with the graphics, and you give it like that to a blind person, what do you think what its score will be? Yeah, but in how many jobs you really need to do that type of work? There is some work, I know, but most of the work where you get this assessment, you're not going to do that type of job. So is that assessment accessible? No, it's not. The way people do their recruitment strategy, they do it mostly on the channels they already know where they were coming from as well, and they mostly reflect the square. That are the square channels. Yeah. Find the triangle channels and the circle channel. Yeah.
No, I think that's a really valid point, and one that I think people will be able to visualize as well.
Yeah. Yeah, and then I make use of what I've learned from people who are blind and deaf is to remember things on a different way.
Yeah, because I think it's challenging for a lot of people to take themselves out of their own experience and to put themselves in else's shoes and to see the world how they see it and experience it how they experience it.
It's a blind spot. You don't know what you don't know. And then people say like, yeah, they were open to everyone, but nobody's coming. And then we're looking through their website and the application, apply here button cannot be read by the software people were blind using. So yeah, it's not so weird. Nobody applies.
Yeah. And from your experience, what learning lessons are there when it comes to creating inclusion that organizations should kind of take note of? What are the important things that they need to consider?
Yeah. Getting back to the points, because that's really about it's accountability, having a strategy, understand why you are doing it, really, make sure that everyone in the organization really gets it. It's not doing good, it's working on your organization for the better, for the future. So and these are the people who are accountable, and these are their targets. Second is accessibility. If you do not do this proactively, you will lose this game for talents too. Because what I see, there's a lot of development on this side, and the best of the best, they have opportunities. So they won't work at you if you don't get the accessibility right. The empowerment, I think that's a continuous thing. Empowerment is on both things. It's also on a certain point you have a kind of group of people from the disability inclusion. Make sure that they organize themselves as well. So you can put knowledge out of that. So you become a real learning organization. How you attract more of these talents and make sure that they can also have a career. So, and that's my fourth point, like most organizations forget, it's about a sustainable impact. So really think through this, not about only hiring people, but also the onboarding part, but also when they are at work, normally you have career conversations to get them to the next stage. Somehow, the disability inclusion, people forget to do the normal things they do, but definitely do that, because otherwise people will leave, we have Ctalents who started at company A, but after 2-3 years, they come back to us. They said, like, I'm ready for the next step, and my organization cannot see the next step yet. And then we support that as well, of course. So that's where also my vision from the first CEO comes. Because if your company can have a blind CEO, you are sure that every level below is also accessible and inclusive. So that's,
Sure, yeah, no, that makes sense. And so for organizations, for leaders in organizations who are looking to get started on their journey to inclusion, or looking to adopt more talent from an organization like yours into their workplace, what would your advice be? What should their first steps be?
Yeah, don't don't start from the beginning, because there's also so much knowledge already out there. Copy paste, but not literally always adapt to your local culture or company. And well, that's a little bit. I start working together with social enterprises. They're really there to share their knowledge and background, and mostly also formulas who could really work there. I think I have a lot of good collaboration with large corporates, and I think this is helping us both. It's helping our mission, but we have so much knowledge we can share, so it's really helping organizations as well, and really put a decent strategy on it. Yeah, not just get 5 people who are handicapped. That's not a strategy.
Yeah, not the tick box, but actually, look, as you said just previously, the sustainable programs where you can actually see continued progress, because I think perfection isn't achievable straight away in a lot of these cases.
It's not. It's you're gonna hear, you're gonna fall, you're gonna learn, you're gonna fall, you're gonna learn. It's like every new thing you're gonna do, because your organization is probably not yet made for it. That's why nobody is there working yet, from this type of group. So it's a learning thing. So don't think it's be done in 2 months. It will take some time, but make sure you put continuous learning elements in your program.
Yeah. And I think we've already spoken about what your goals are with Ctalents and having, a CEO placed in an organization. But what do you think perhaps 2024 looks like for Ctalents, or the future looks like for, I don't know, for the community that you're built?
Well, the future looks like it's really great, because the interest is growing. So new large corporates came to us and also asked us for a proposal for also further collaboration, not only with us, but now we're setting up collaboration with other social entrepreneurs who have their own pool of untapped talents, like people with autism, neurodiversity, different flavors, let's call it like that. Because I think for larger organizations, it would really help out if we work together more closely, because a lot of our subjects, like accessibility, like empowerment, like it's kind of the same. There are some twitches, of course, in how to, but we can combine this knowledge. So my dream for the coming year is that we can really execute on this plan, so that we have that we can be the #1 broker provider for impact. Not only for the group of talents we already know, but also for my fellow social entrepreneurs.
And for inclusion in a more general sense, what do you think 2024 is going to bring? Do you think that we're going to see much change, or that we're going to see this continued growth in interest in inclusion?
I think I'm on the good side of the business. I'm already doing this for like 15 years, but now, it started out as a really crazy idea, but now there's a true market, because of, I think there's a increased interest because of legislation of certain type. There's also social return that really gives it a push. But next to that, look at the labor market. If you want to be there in a few years' time, you also need to tap in this untapped pool of talents. But next to that, make sure you're an impact focused organization, because the new generation otherwise don't want to work for you. So I think inclusion will come with that as well, because it's more normal to look at potential instead of disabilities. Yeah.
Well, thank you for answering all of my questions. But before we finish, I wanted to give you the opportunity to kind of raise anything that perhaps we've not touched on. Is there something that you'd like our audience to take away from this conversation?
Yeah, I think the most important thing, if you want to do this because you want to do good and only want to do good, don't do it. You do this to enforce your business, to make sure your organization can also look on a different way, and really create the competitive edge you need in the future. And why I'm putting it like this, if you really look at the subject like this, then it can work out. Because we have companies who already work for 10 years. They have, quite a base, and it's working really well because of this. they're not doing good. And of course you're doing good if you're performing this good, but it's a different approach of it. I think that's really the important thing of this subject. So make it a professional ambition, a professional plan, a professional execution.
Well, thank you, Sandra, for joining me today and for sharing your perspectives and insights. I think the work that Ctalents is doing is great and is really quite inspiring for a lot of people. And if anyone would like to learn more about Ctalents, then they can find the links to your website on our webpage at theuwi.com/podcast. But I do really appreciate you lending your time to have this discussion with me today.
Yeah, thank you. I'm teaching you a sign language. Thank you. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you very much, Sandra.
Yes, thank you. Have a good day.
You too.